Good afternoon, my friends and ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Rob Manna Show live here on Tuesday afternoons. We've got a great show for you today. It's about opposing Marxism and critical theory policies in the U.S. military, because guess what? That now makes you unfit for command. We've suspected it for quite some time that there were Marxists in the leadership of the United States Armed Forces and some senior leaders even. But with the recent firing of a rising star Space Force squadron commander, now we know for sure. That's why we are talking to a Stand Together Against Racism and Radicalism in the Services, or STARS, leader today, one of the founders. STARS partners with our military armed services, addressing issues that promote unity, division, not division, and STARS is supporting the Space Force commander who was fired for openly discussing Marxist and critical theory policies in the U.S. Department of Defense. STARS only seeks to educate military leaders, the men and women that serve, and most importantly, the American people, of the dangers of neo-Marxism and critical race theory ideology, which we've been talking about a lot lately. They believe in ensuring that the U.S. military remains free of political influence, which is the right way to go, while still adhering to the United States Constitution. Folks, it's vital to the U.S. national security and to a secure and free constitutional republic. They also envision service academies and armed forces that will always faithfully serve the American people while remaining apolitical, colorblind, and unified. STARS Incorporated's founders began their efforts in response to a Black Lives Matter propaganda-laden video published by the U.S. Air Force Academy coaches in the summer of 2020. They are also supporting, as I said, Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeir, commander of the 11th Space Warning Squadron at Buckley Air Force Base, Colorado, who was relieved from his post Friday by Lieutenant General Stephen Whiting, the head of Space Operations Command, over a loss of confidence in his ability to lead. And what he didn't say is because the firing came after CD Media's, or Creative Destructive Media's, interview with Colonel Lohmeir, where he detailed his belief the U.S. Armed Forces are facing a Maoist revolution. Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeir was relieved of command Friday evening. Lohmeir recently published a book called The Irresistible Revolution, subtitled Marxism's Goal of Conquest and the Unmaking of the American Military. My guest today is one of the founders of STARS, retired Lieutenant General Rod Bishop. General Bishop held many key positions throughout the United States Air Force, where he commanded airmen at every operational level, including 2 squadrons, an operations group, an airlift wing, a numbered Air Force, and Air Command Europe, while also completing numerous strategic Air Force and joint assignments throughout the Department of Defense. Sir, welcome to the Rob Manna Show. We certainly really appreciate you coming on with us today. I know you're traveling.
Hey, Rob, it's great to stop at this rest area and have a conversation with you.
Well, thank you, sir. I do sincerely appreciate it, and I appreciate all the work that you and other Academy graduates and officers are doing, and I know I've been working with quite a few of them the last year since we saw this really strange episode start arising that got y'all's attention out at the Air Force Academy, is where all this really kind of started the organization called STARS growing, didn't it?
Yeah, it sure did, Rob. I mean, as you said in your intro, in fact, one of the members you've had on your show before, Dr. Ron Scott, alerted me to a video that the coaches had put together. There was a headline in the Gazette-Telegraph that day that said, Air Force football takes firm social stance with video in support of Black Lives Matter. And I kind of went, huh, really? I mean, come on, why is our football team going political here all of a sudden? And so the superintendent at the time, he had worked for me when he was a colonel, and I put him in his one-star billet, so I thought I knew him pretty well, and I wrote him a note that said, hey, Soup, if you want to put together a video that says the Air Force Academy and Air Force football stands against racism, you will have 51,000 graduates standing arm in arm with you and saying amen. But if you're going to use the slogan of a Marxist found organization, it's going to be divisive. And little did I know how prescient that comment was, because as we came to, I mean, there was Ron Scott, Dr. Scott, myself, and about 2 other people I put on an email. And all of a sudden we're finding out, well, so-and-so has written, so-and-so has called. And literally there were tens of phone calls, hundreds of emails from all disparate people, mostly grads in the Air Force, going to the superintendent, asking to please, would you please separate our alma mater from a Marxist organization. Those calls, including 2 Zooms with the athletic director and the football coach, went pretty much ignored. In September, that started in July. 2 months later, in September, the football coaches put together another video, but they left the old one up. And so we said, well, wait a minute, guys. You know, the intent here was to not be divisive. If you're going to leave something that's still divisive up. So we started working with the incoming superintendent. We fed him lots of information. And he told us he agreed with the message of the video initially. I'll stop there because I could rattle on, but unless you want me to keep going.
Well, I do want you to keep going. Let me make a slight adjustment here. The technology seems to overcome us sometimes, sir. There is no man behind the curtain on this show. I'm the producer for you, so I appreciate your patience with us. But I do want you to keep going. But let me ask you. So they basically ignored you, and these are. And I'm just going to say, look, these are men and women in charge of the Air Force that I know. I mean, my peers are now 3 and 4 stars. I retired in 2011. So I know all these men and women. They're not crazy people. They're not. And I know they're honorable and ethical, but I don't understand what we're now seeing. It took you guys a little bit to get the organization up and running and official. I went to the website today. Can you rattle off that website? It's stars.us. Is that correct?
That's great. Stars with 2 R's for racism and radicalism in the services. And please, I'm betting on you there, Rob, that you can bring us more new members today than we did yesterday on the War Room with Steve Bannon. We had over 1,000 people give us their email yesterday to join our group.
Well, that's fantastic. I was going to ask you another set of questions here. So, yeah, that's my next question. Do I have to be a service academy graduate or a student to join STARS, or is this open to everybody, anybody that wants to help?
No, that's one of the reasons, great question. It's one of the reasons we went to a 501c3 instead of a 501c19, which requires a higher percentage of veterans or people associated with the military. So, yeah, it's open to the entirety of American population that want to stand up against this Marxist invasion. We used to call it infiltrating. When we first started, to leave off where I finished or started on that story, this is now September, a few months later, and we're still seeing the video up. And that's about the time when we started to learn about this thing called critical race theory. And it seemed like every corner we turned, we found another example. And thankfully, for us Air Force people, our academy, we don't feel as infected as West Point and Annapolis are. I mean, you've heard about another case out there. I won't go into it because it's still under settlement. But some of our lawyers were assisting Naval Academy and some of the grads, and now we're coming across social media posts from Naval Academy grads and professors and others assigned to the Naval Academy kind of being vulgar against the police and supporting Black Lives Matter. And we're going, whoa. Wow. And then we hear from West Point that they're having these stand down days on their own where they're being required to watch movies produced by left-wing Hollywood with left-wing politicians and left-wing media that are a part of the movie. And we're going, well, wait a minute, where's the balance? So come about the middle of September, as you may remember, President Trump put out an executive order banning critical race theory. And we go, good. So we had two options at that point in time because the video was still up. Well, maybe three. We could have just withdrawn and said, okay, you guys win, leave the video up. You've produced a new one. Thank you very much. But everyone said, no, wait a minute. This is bigger now. As we turned every corner and saw critical race theory elsewhere, we felt like we wanted to have a teaching moment because we feel like most people are going into this innocent. They've just been insidiously indoctrinated, as I think you were starting to infer, and they just didn't realize what was happening to them. So the other two options, since we discarded that one, were, well, the Air Force Academy apparently wants this video out in the public square. We can make it go real public for them. We can call up Rob Hannes and get on a bunch of shows and talk about it. But what was that going to do at that point in time? At that point in time, that was going to cause more of what was already happening, and that was donors. In fact, my wife just read to me today, riding down the road, an email sent to the president of the Air Force, the CEO of the Air Force Foundation and the AOG, Association of Graduates, that said, I'm not giving the Academy one red dime because of, it's going woke. And he referred that gentleman to STARS because that's where we're about. We didn't want to see people draw support away from the school that I certainly love, nor did we want people to say, forget the military. So we said, well, we believe saying Black Lives Matter 7 times in an angry tone in a 3-minute period is crossing a political line. So if you look at the applicable Air Force and DOD regulations, it sure seemed like it. So we did the other option, which was file an Inspector General complaint. And it took almost 2 months, a little bit after the election, about a week after the election, when President-elect Biden at the time had already determined that he was going to do away with the critical race theory executive orders, that the IG found that, nope, Black Lives Matter isn't political. But now, fast forward to today, and we have someone, and I'm not attacking the Air Force or the Air Force leadership. As you and I both know, as Air Force veterans, you serve at the pleasure of the command and of the Air Force. So I'm not going to criticize their leaders. They have their reasons, hopefully their constitutional reasons for relieving Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeir of command. But from where we sat, okay, so the IG, in our case, is saying, no, this isn't political. Wow, we just started scratching our heads. So we said, okay, I guess the other option then is the nuclear option, and that's start to make it public.
Yeah,
and so we started.
So when you filed your complaint, and the IG's answer was, no, this is not partisan political messaging, correct? Is that the words they used?
It was no, not exactly. It was very, very curt letter. We find nothing wrong with. And they referred to Office of Special Counsel finding that said Black Lives Matter in the workplace was okay. But but if you show that video to anyone, I've shown that video to probably at least 50 people. And then I show them the video, then I say, and the Air Force says that that's not political. I've had no other reaction other than a scoff.
Yeah, it's I've watched the original video and the remake of one. It's partisan politics because the Democrat Party has taken Black Lives Matter, the concept, on as their own, in my opinion. And forgive me, I've run for office a couple of times, so I'm in politics. I'm a kind of a weird mix of a military officer in politics, and I'm going to call out the political appointees here. Like you said, I'm not going to call out the commanders. Those folks have to make decisions every day about who's fit, who's unfit, and discipline decisions, those kind of things. But
you
do the Defense Secretary and the Secretary of the Air Force are political appointees, and I'm calling them out right now. You need to investigate this to make sure that commanders haven't been put in a position where they feel a need to say someone's unfit because they're calling out Marxism and critical theory and critical race theory, which is a clear Marxist concept according to everything I've ever read on it, from Harvard to the media. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. Well, you call out who you need to do. You introduced us as being an organization that wants to stay apolitical. Exactly. We, just like Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeir, are attacking the ideology. This insidious ideology that, again, we used to say infiltrated or crept, but now we say has invaded our military. We want to keep that out because we see firsthand how divisive it is. For example, just as we're going through this time, about the time of President Trump's executive order, I get a visit from a cadet I know at our cabin in the mountain. And we're sitting outside on the deck, and he says, General Bishop, I've wanted to go to the Air Force Academy my entire life. You know that. I know that because I've known him and his family since before he was born. And he said, but I got to tell you, the Academy is the worst place in the world to be as a white male Christian. And I go, wow, I mean, that just broke my heart. Oh, why are you saying that? Well, it's just this insidious stuff. And I talked to really, is this a one-off? So I called up a cadet that we had sponsored for 4 years. And I said, hey, guy, why didn't you tell me about this? Is this true? And he said, well, I didn't notice it. But now that I look back on it, it was like the culture was changing underneath my feet. And so, I mean, those were two. So now I'm starting to, and I said, well, okay, there's two people. Do me a favor, go out and ask some of your friends. So he called me back the next week and says, I've talked to eight of my friends and they all say the same thing. And I said, we're of any of different skin color than you. Yeah, two of them were black. And they all felt the same thing. This isn't talking about the new superintendent because, I'm sorry.
What age group is this?
These are lieutenants. So recent grads.
Okay. Wow.
So I mean, that was kind of an eye opener. And so now we're in November and the IG comes out and says, yeah, no harm, no foul. And so we said, well, we got to go down the road, I guess, then of publicizing it. But we, again, didn't want to do it. So, very week by week would say, okay, well, we're going to have to do this. And then I'm writing to the head of the Association of Graduates, copying the superintendent, saying, okay, we hate to do this, but please give us all 50,000 plus email addresses of all the academy. And at the same time, we're reaching out saying, could we have a dialogue? Could we talk? Mm-hmm. Could we, and because of COVID, we met in Zoom. And we did some things behind the scenes, to help facilitate the decision. But the present superintendent, I give him a lot of credit. And this is a great message, I think, for your audience is, because people always ask, well, what can I do? What you can do is engage. If you engage and you push back and you want to have a dialogue, and I hope we have time here to show you some of the successes we've had at the Academy through engaging, because we're blessed to have a superintendent at the United States Air Force Academy that listens, and he wants to be apolitical. But as you pointed out, and this is as political as I will get, I don't think Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeir would have been dismissed if President Trump had been reelected. You get my point. So, I mean,
and that's my concern with the political appointees, sir, and that is that there is now an environment where commanders who are apolitical feel a need to take action on things they wouldn't normally have taken action on. That's what I'm really worried about as somebody that's been active in politics, and why I want to get this out there, because I'm going to have my folks not only join your organization, but I want them to send a note to the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the Air Force to say, hey, what is going on? This doesn't look right, Yeah,
that's great, Rob. And the other thing they can do is if they know leaders. I mean, we're having this dialogue, and I mean, I know the superintendent probably doesn't like a former fellow 3rd Air Force commander bugging him all the time, but I'm saying, come on, Rich, well, I'll give you an example on that. Just maybe 3 weeks ago or so, probably 10 or 12 grads wrote a letter, which was probably somewhat precipitated by stars. Were you aware, have you talked on your show about the guidance that the politicians put together for the Secretary of Defense to sign that went out to all the units on this extremist down day? Have you
Yes, I'm
talked
aware.
about?
I
Okay,
am
so
aware of that.
so
Matter of
all
fact,
four
I have
case
a
studies.
staff sergeant's son in the Air Force right now that's had the training, so I'm very
Okay.
well aware.
So for your audience who might not be aware, all four case studies, all four of them, were white supremacist case studies from 2019. It was like the leftist-inspired extremism that we experienced as a nation across Seattle, Portland, Minneapolis, New York, you name the city, didn't happen in 2020. So, Stars went to the superintendent and said, General Clark, if that's what the academy is going to put forth on your extremist down day, you're going to lose probably half of the cadet wing. And I sent it to a present cadet. I sent those 13 pages of guidance, and I said, look at the case studies. We're trying to get the superintendent to also mention that there's extremism on both sides of the coin. And his reply was, thanks for trying, General B, but they'll only give the white supremacy case studies. I mean, that told me something right there. But we kept on it, and we hit him about 2 or 3 more times with some methods that we have to send messages to 3 stars, and in the end, when he introduced that day, he said, I want you to make sure everybody know there's extremism on both sides, but the materials that have been provided by the Secretary of Defense and the Air Force were still all white supremacist examples. So then some grads got together that wrote an article, maybe you saw it, caught it a couple of weeks ago in the Military Times, and they put this article together, the title of which was Enough About Taking Sides. The only extremism that counts is white supremacy and white extremism. So, we saw that, you go, you got to be kidding. So we get in touch with the Military Times editor. We write a STARS approved response that defended, because they called out the superintendent and they called out the AOG CEO, retired Lieutenant General, former superintendent. And so we put together an article defending both of them and saying, let's all be Americans, basically. We're all one humanity. And the Military Times wouldn't publish it. So really? Why is that? I asked, but we haven't gotten an answer.
Well, I'll publish it, sir. I've got a website, and I'll publish it, and I'll get it out if you want me to publish it. I have no problem.
Well, I sent it to the superintendent with a note that said, hey, General Clark, sorry, we were trying to stand up for you and General Gould, and he came back and said, I'd just as soon not have it be published because it's dying. And, we had to change some of the words because we were fearful that the left would come after the superintendent, giving what we were, I'm sure, even though we're trying to stay apolitical, would be seen as a conservative group. I mean, we had, for example, outstanding leadership. Well, no, that might be seen as too negative by the left. So we better take out the word outstanding. So, we just had General Clark has demonstrated leadership.
Yeah.
But, he saw the same thing. He said, no, other people, I just want to stay apolitical and keep our focus on the oath. And we said, amen, because that's where it should be, on the Constitution and on our oath of office, not
that's
dividing us.
Yeah,
not dividing us by, do you have blue eyes, green eyes, or what the color of your skin is?
Well, that's good news, sir, because I know Rich. We're peers, as a matter of fact. We're the same original year group. So, plus I've flown with him in a certain platform that is the best bomber to ever be built on the face of the earth in the history of mankind, the Bone. And he's one of those men and women I talked about at the beginning. Yeah. I know these men and women. They are not crazy and they're not political. Yeah. So that's good news that he stood up and at least did the right thing from his perspective. Although it's really scary that the Secretary of Defense's office and the Secretary of the Air Force's office continued to press, because that's, as I mentioned, my son is a staff sergeant in the Air Force, and he told me about the scenarios and the whole training. So it's really disturbing that training material and direct set of directives continuing on down to the line supervisor and bottom line down to the lowest position rank. And you know, they have to take what they're given. If the SecDef's office refuses to change it, and it just really disturbs me that happened, because you know what the outcome is going to be. It's going to be some long range, far reaching effects that you have no idea how that stuff's been ingested and digested by the young men and women who have volunteered to serve this country, that will come out much later.
Yeah, it is definitely, Rob, just slamming a wedge right into the heart of unit cohesiveness. And that's why, I mean, some of us have been working this for 12 hours a day, almost every week, just because we're so passionate. I tell my wife that this is the poorest paid job I've ever had, but I feel like it's the most important mission I've ever been on. Because we just really would pray that we can make our country, and especially our military, take a turn and distance itself from this ideology that, again, just tears at the moral fabric of what our military should all be about.
It does, and it not only tears at the moral fabric, it tears at the team fabric, and you touched on it a second ago, sir, and that is, you know, I mean, people like us that have been in command and the spouses and families that have been part of the military know that, you know, if I'm flying in a combat aircraft into a combat mission, I have never in my life ever considered even the gender of one of the other crew members as it relates to trust of the ability to do the mission or to save my life if necessary. That's the kind of relationships we have with our team in the military. So my last combat deployment, I was a squadron commander. If I were in that environment today, and I have black officers, which I did, then I go back and I think about that and I go, well, would they be trusting me when the DO is assigning them the sorties? You know, would they be trusting me if I need them to do additional duty of some sort, like supervisor of flying? Do they trust that I'm making the right decisions? And I think this shatters that trust based on skin color.
Yep. I mean, that's the way I feel. Well, it's certainly the way I feel, although, you know, through the course of December, January, and February, we had 3 Zoom meetings with the SOUP. And in working with his staff, they said, well, we're going to have these people on the SOUP side. And I answered and said, well, wait a minute. We shouldn't be taking sides on this issue. We should all be on the same team. If we see racism, squash it on the spot. We all want to be one. You know, we want to put our arms around one another. We don't want to say sides. But they had a number of black grads on it, and they informed me that in their career, that the people who understood that the black community within the Air Force least understood that the black community somewhat felt oppressed were white general officers. And I go, wow, I guess I must have missed something, because in the 7 commands I had in the Air Force, I had a black first sergeant, I had a black command chief, and I had a black deputy. And I would have thought that one of those people would have told me that was the case. And so I called up a retired 4-star friend. So between the two of us, we had 78 years. And I said, how many instances of racial injustice or racial examples did you see? He had none. I had one. It was at a squadron party. I overheard a racial slur. And I went up to the microphone, told everybody to stop what they were doing. And I said, look, that kind of stuff doesn't happen in this unit. We are all one team. Guess what? 6 months later, that squadron went on to be the outstanding squadron in the Air Force. Period. You know, you squash it on the spot. If somebody feels victimized or oppressed, boy, I would have to look at their commanders, because they didn't create the right command climate, I think, because at least I want to think that the 7 commands I did were blessed to have people would come forward if something was amiss.
Yeah, I'm with you, sir. I've asked all of my peers that I've worked closely with, and most importantly, subordinates, if they had seen any of this kind of thing, either in my command or in commands we were around, and it's zero. It's zero. You know, and I commanded from the wing, the squadron to the wing level, and was a vice wing commander too. So those are not small
No,
portions of the population. You know,
no.
and and then when I was a vice, we had a black command chief too. So I mean, and my boss at the wing commander, my first boss was a black general officer. So I never got anything from him or any feedback from him what's going on in any of the related to me. And there's plenty of, according to what these grads are telling y'all, there seems to be a lot of this and plenty of opportunity for it. But where is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's incredible.
I've asked. In fact, we just saw a cadet that we know this past week because we were in Washington State here visiting our daughter, and he was going through, coincidentally, survival school at Fairchild, and we had a little bit of discussion on that. I mean, are you seeing any of this that you know that the media is pushing and all? It was interesting though to watch I think it was two combatant commanders about 2 weeks ago testify, and they both said I have zero indication that I have any type of extremism in either of my commands, but yet somehow, in fact, I called up an SES that you might know if I said his name, but I won't, because he was over in 3rd Air Force with us, and he's now on the Secretary of the Air Force's staff. And I was asking him about the guidance that the Air Force put out for that extremist down day. And I said, why in the world will we put out such one-sided examples? I mean, don't people realize that we're guilting the majority of the population by, holding those things up? And don't they see how divisive people are going to feel resentment to that? And he goes, General, come on, the political environment, look who's running the country, and look who's driving the media. That was his answer. Those weren't my words. So I think that explains a lot about what we have to stand up and fight against.
Well, that we've always managed to. I mean, it's not been perfect, but I spent a little bit over 30 years on active duty and grew up in it. My dad was a retired Air Force Master Sergeant, so I was born into the Air Force literally. And I mean, there's always been a little bit of stuff, that comes in from culture, because I mean, we are a microcosm of the culture of America, really, especially now that we're all volunteer force. But there's never been such an overt push from the senior people in the services to push an ideology like what we're seeing with critical theory and this neo-Marxism. And it literally is Marxist ideology, this type of critical theory.
Court. I'm just motioning. My wife's here, and I had a pretty good battery power, but it's showing red, so I might go in this building. We're at a rest stop. It's a welcome center for Oregon, and see if there's nobody in there. She might. So we'll try to.
Well, that'd be
try
great.
to adjust here as we can.
That'd be great. But I'm just never. What's really startling is senior people on the civilian seniors, and some are former military, as you know, are allowing this to be pushed, and it's a partisan ideology now, especially now, and we've fought for our entire existence. Its entire existence. It's an enemy of the American Constitution, is what Marxism is, and this type of theory, this critical theory or critical race theory. There's more than just critical race theory, folks, by the way. There's a lot of other things.
Let's see if she can open it and she has a cord we can plug this in.
I mean,
Sorry, we're just trying to make sure we get energy here.
Yes, sir. Is there any chance that we can get some civilian senior leaders to stand up and say, no, we can't, we have to keep the military fenced off from this political infiltration?
Yeah, that is a goal of STAR, Rob, and another great question. Yesterday on Steve Bannon's show, after the first commercial break, he, comes over and he's talking to me on the phone and he says, "Hey, General, we're going to win this thing." And I said, "Well, I hope you're right, Steve." And he goes, "No, we're going to win this thing. We have the moms, we have the vets. You're helping us get the vets, so we're going to win this thing." And I said, "Yeah, but what we also need are the senior leaders of the services." So to circle back on what we were talking about earlier with the example I gave in General Clark in that article that some grads wrote. Oh, this is great. We're getting an extension cord out here. Thank you so much. What General Clark said, no, he didn't want us, engaging anymore with the media and the press. We on that particular topic, we get it. But I wrote him back, and he said, I don't want to be seen as one side or the other. And I said, I understand that, Rich, General Clark. However, we do need senior leadership to start pushing back. And you're part of the senior leadership of the Air Force. You have to push back on what the politicians are forcing down. It sounds strong, but in some respects, particularly what I hear is happening at West Point, being graded on how much you support critical race theory was an instance I worked last. I mean, that stuff, we've just got to try to educate the right people. And as you very well gave our mission is trying to educate people. And please, people, understand, we're not trying to be partisan. We're just trying to push back on an ideology. It seems like.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to transition over to Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeir here for a bit.
As was I.
Okay, go ahead, sir. That's we're on the same page.
So let me tell you how we came to know about him. So we put in our IG complaint, and we're about having to go public. Now we're back in November timeframe, and we said, well, we really don't want to go public, so let's keep inching it up. And I mentioned writing an email to the CEO of the Association of Graduates and copying the superintendent, asking for all the emails.
Right.
And I said, okay, so if we're going to go public, let's go public light first. And so my next door neighbor, who you've heard a little bit of this story because he's the guy that helped Dr. Scott break the Hunter Biden laptop story. He's a former Fox News reporter. I asked him to write an article for us about STARS, although we didn't even have a name yet then, about our efforts of what we have been up to try to get the Air Force to distance itself from this Marxist ideology. And he wrote it, and our intended audience was the Colorado Springs Gazette. Well, he said he knew the editor. The editor told him, yeah, we're going to publish it. The editor was also a reporter for the Washington Examiner. So we're going, okay, well, Washington and the Air Force and Colorado Springs, those are two good audiences. We won't go nationwide. But they never published it. So about 3 weeks went by, and I asked, his name is Burnson. I asked Mr. Burnson if we could take it to another one of our members who owns his own media company, and he posted it out on some conservative websites. And Colonel Lohmeir's dad saw the article and sent it to Colonel Lohmeir, to his son. And so Colonel Lohmeir called me up the next day, and we had a great talk. Told us he was writing a book, told us he had studied Marxism for 2 years. I mean, this guy, I can only say this about one person, or else it would be a false statement. He is by far the most articulate officer of any service I've met in my entire 38 years in uniform or my 12 years since. He is so sharp and articulate. And, from my perspective, he's taken the right approach on this. He hasn't criticized the leadership. In fact, he praises leadership, if you've seen all that he's been talking about. But what he's taking issue is what he learned and what he considers to be extremist ideology on the left. And he made the point, I don't know if you saw his show last night, he made the point with Hannity that, the Secretary of Defense came out and asked us to stand against extremism. Well, this Marxist ideology is a form of extremism when it's striking at the heart of what our Constitution and our oath are telling us we should be standing up for, against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Yeah.
This is a domestic enemy. People don't understand that, I think. They haven't come to realize that. But if you look at the divisiveness that it causes within a unit, that is an enemy. That is what Abraham Lincoln was telling us about, the enemy within, I think.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, it's a much more dangerous enemy than these white supremacists, the ghosts that I say that Chris Ray is, and blue-haired MAGA grandmas from January 6th, and those kind of people. This ideology, I mean, we've spent trillions of dollars defeating the old Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc on the same ideology, because of the same ideology. So, if Colonel Lohmeir has identified it and has seen enough facts, and it seems to me, I've seen some clips of his talks and skimmed the book, that he has enough facts to really state definitively that yes, it has happened. We have policies that are neo-Marxist and critical theory policies, and I don't mean to exclude the word race out of that, but they're critical theory policies. There's not just a race that could be associated with transgenderism, homosexuality, white supremacy, all of those types of things that are designed to divide peoples and teams. And this team, the DoD team, is the most important team that most Americans used to trust. My career, the polling on that was at about 87%. It's down to 56% in the last year.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah,
but your point, your point is spot on. I've ordered, I think, 6 or 7 copies of Matt's book, but they've come since I've been on this trip, so I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But I'm told he gives 2 examples in the book that really resonated with me, and I heard him tell these examples because I invited him to speak to the STARS group early on. Once we established contact and we found, we're in the same battle space here. We're fighting the same enemy. Boy, you are so articulate. Would you come and talk to the STARS group? So he spoke to, I want to say 35 of us early on. And 2 examples that really resonated with me is as a very conscientious. You've seen him. You can see how conscientious he is. Yes. He told the stories of that he interviews everybody getting out of his squadron. And one week he had a black female airman who wanted to separate from the Air Force early. And of course he's, well, why do you want to get out early? And she says, I was brought up to think that America was my country, but now that I've been in the Air Force, I'm finding that I'm an outsider in my own country. And I didn't realize that until the Air Force has taught me that. And I go, wow, how are these messages getting through? And he said, then the next week, I believe it was the next week, a white male airman came to him and he said he wanted to get out. Well, why do you want to get out? He said, I'm tired of the identity politics. So he made a very good point to the group, and one that I can see in talking with cadets and officers throughout the Air Force and other services. And that point is, if we don't change course a little bit, in fact, you probably are the same boat as I've been. We, in our retirement age, we still do retirements. And I got to tell you, the last 4 or 5 retirements I've done, mostly for colonels and 1 lieutenant colonel, they all have told me it's not the same Air Force when you were in, General Bishop. So, we need to turn this ship a little bit. Get us back on course.
Yeah, because if we're back on course, I mean, the damage can be irreparable, quite frankly. The damage to the capability that's the military's there for, and that's the find, fight, find America's enemies, fight them and win for the United States. there's no way that we could accomplish those goals, that purpose, with a team the way folks are being taught. And the young African American lady's exit interview with Colonel Lohmeir is really telling and compelling.
Yeah. Well, something else that was telling to me, because it goes to the point you were making earlier, is how did this happen without, it seems like we were asleep at the switch or something, because aside from being in the same battle space, we found out we had another commonality with Colonel Lohmeir, and that is he had filed an IG complaint. And his IG complaint, the guy has a lot of courage, was against his base commander. And the reason he filed that IG complaint against the base commander was within the month after President Trump issuing his executive order, the base commander continued to require critical race theory training. I think the book of that month was why, so you want to talk about race. So I went on Amazon and looked at, what Amazon has to say about it. I go, we're making, okay, if we're going to make them, what I like to say, if you're going to make people read White Fragility, then you should make them read White Guilt, because we want to develop critical thinkers, I would hope, in our Air Force. We don't want to indoctrinate them into one ideology or the other. Expose them to everything, but don't force something down the throat. So coincidentally, ours was just after the election, in Matt's case, on January 6th, the Space Force IG found, to me, it comes across. How do I do this without criticizing the leadership here? But I guess as an outsider looking in, when you disobey a direct written order of the commander of chief, there's no repercussions.
Sadly, sir, there apparently was more of that disobeying direct orders from that particular commander in chief, and their lawful orders too, not crazy ones. So I have to say, unfortunately, I'm not surprised, but I am a bit taken aback that an Air Force colonel is getting away with that. A group commander is able to get away with that without being.
Oh, don't worry. He was on the brigadier general list the next day.
I'm sure. That shouldn't scare anybody. Actually, you ought to be scared to death, folks. And join up. I'll say this again. Join STARS, STARRS.us. Get on their email list, because these folks are genuine apolitical Americans that want to make sure that the right things are being done. And you mentioned the reading list. I don't have a problem either with tough subjects being on generals, admirals, colonels' reading list. I did the same thing myself, but what I have a problem with is the indoctrination of this stuff. And it sounds like it's more like an indoctrination program than it is developing your professional depth and breadth, so you have an idea of what's going on.
So at the risk of upsetting the left, I guess, about your former airplane mate, the present superintendent of the Air Force Academy, let me again share with you some good news stories on what standing up and speaking up can do. So a couple of good news stories on General Clark. He took the old video down, produced a new one.
Good.
That's pretty good. Number two, we found out there was a diversity inclusion reading room inside the Air Force Library. And so we sent some cadets over to say, hey, well, what kind of books are in there? Black Panthers, early Malcolm X, Black Lives Matter, History of a Martyr, one book from Martin Luther King. So we raised that in one of our Zooms, made the pitch that we just made to your audience here. Where's the balance? If you're going to read White Fragility, where are the books from Shelby Steele, from Jason Riley, from Carol Swain, the Black Americans that have a totally different point of view on
Martin Luther King, more books from Martin Luther King. I see him as the model we should all be following.
Yeah. So, that was, we think, another big success. And I already mentioned the Extremist Down Day. So, those are three good things, I think. And then we've provided him a list of speakers, starting with Senator Tim Scott, Condoleezza Rice, Shelby Steele, and a number of other prominent Black Americans for next year's National Character and Leadership Symposium. And he seems to be receptive. I'm sending it to my team. Let's see what we can do. And we sent him a whole list of other books for the Diversity Including Reading Room and said, hey, we'll buy them for you if you want. So, I mean, that's what people can do when you start to speak out and push back.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't have to push back with threats. I like the way you guys are doing it. I read some of the website and talking about those situations with General Clark already.
Yeah.
But so we don't have to be mean about pushing back, but we do have to stand up and push back. And we have to do it at not just at the service academy level. We've got to do it all up and down the United States government and state governments, all the way down to your PTA. We've really got to push back on because it's not just troubling, but it's wrong. It's wrong history. It's wrong values for America, and it's all of these are things that people like Martin Luther King, he died to stop this kind of thinking. Judging people on the color of their skin, and that's what critical race theory does. That's what this extremism does. Is it tells you to judge people based on the color of their skin, and it teaches it to little kids all the way up through adulthood. Apparently, you could see this infiltration, not just in DOD, but across the entire American culture, and it's very disturbing. Very disturbing. What do you think, sir, are what's Colonel Lohmeir's next steps? Are you aware of anything that he's going to be taking on?
Well, I'm certainly not, a confidant of him. I can remember talking to him back in October, and I can tell you he realized back in October that the situation he finds himself in today was very much a possibility in his mind at that time. But if you read his book, and again, I haven't read it yet because I haven't gotten home, but somebody this morning sent me his last paragraph. And his last paragraph went to something along the lines of that he just had lunch with a friend and some other officers, and he was telling them about the book project. And one of his friends said to him, Matt, I don't know if he used his name or not, but people respect and you'd think would want to support somebody who thinks is doing the right thing. So I know in his mind he thinks he's doing the right thing. I don't think any determination beyond that has been made, although I can tell you in talking with Senator Cotton's military legislative assistant yesterday, they told me to make sure if he gets out of the Air Force, he runs for Congress.
Absolutely. I'll help him. I'll be an advisor if he wants me to. No charge. I support veterans through my political action committees, and they get special treatment. Like they don't pay commission on TV ad buys.
Right.
If it comes from my pack, because we need more veterans in Congress, and I don't want him to get out. I think he needs to be the chief of staff of the Air Force someday, as chairman of the Joint Chiefs someday is what I think. Because let me just tell you, folks, a person like Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeir, who has been promoted 2 years early. I think Bannon mentioned it as deep selected. That's his nautical career.
Four times distinguished graduate.
He's been
number one in his class, one of the number one.
If it's 4 times in every school we've sent him to, he's been a distinguished graduate. And when I say I mean the American people send these folks to these schools. That means that they're at the top 1%, within that top 1% every single time, folks.
Mm-hmm.
So this man is not someone who is just some guy that's decided he's going to make a name for himself. When I look at the excerpts from the book that I've seen, I mean, he has deeply studied this, and I'll say it again. I think he has studied it so well that he can be a definitive authority. And studying a subject in a matter like this is what makes you a definitive authority, and combine that with his experience and what he's actually seen and been told he has to do, and what he's seen others do, backs up what he's telling you. So this is a person who is going to do great things for our country, or for whatever entity
no matter where.
decides
Yeah.
to get involved in. And thank
But
God
you-
we
but
still
you
have
know-
them.
Yeah, but if they cut you or me, would bleed Air Force blue, and to me that's the thing that tugs at my heartstrings, I guess, the most is, the Air Force made the decision. I'm not going to criticize it. They made it for reasons that they probably have justification for, but what a talent we have lost for our Air Force, which I think is the point you were making. And so, Matt's book is #1 on Barnes and Noble and on Amazon. He told me, I talked to him this morning. He said, if it says temporarily out of stock, just go ahead and hit the buy because the printer will keep printing. Is what he told me.
Yeah, they print them as they were needed. So especially on Amazon, keep doing it. And folks, if you don't follow Jack Posobiec, he's tweeting about this about 10 times a day. He's got 1.2 million followers, but all the links are there. You can go right into his Twitter account and find them within about 10 seconds. And we need to keep Lohmeir's book as #1. And I hope he gets to stay in the Air Force. And you know what? These things have a habit of being turned around, not necessarily reversed, but good things happen in the future when folks go through a tough spot like this lieutenant colonel is going through, if they stay with it. So we'll see what happens with him. I'm sure the good news is we have him, and he really believes in freedom, and he believes in American values, or he wouldn't be standing up, even in uniform. And I think you mentioned that he's been nonpartisan, apolitical, hasn't called any Air Force leaders out by name, or even criticized them, and that's the way he should be doing it. So he's kind of gotten some negative payback for doing the right thing, but that's the way things are in this world, unfortunately. So, sir, what's the future for STARS look like? What are your next steps? We talked about a lot of the accomplishments, which are good. So, what plans do y'all have? I should say we have, because I'm signing up now that I know there's a website where I can sign up. I'm going to be a member of the group too.
We welcome you to the group. I guess our ultimate goal is to put ourselves out of business, to win this war, to keep critical race theory out of the military. In the meantime, we have a congressional outreach program that is run by somebody who's worked the Hill a number of years. Since we're a 501c3, we cannot lobby Congress, but we sure can educate them. And so in an educational vein here now, Senator Cotton has a bill in front of Congress to eliminate critical race theory. You've probably seen some introduced by other congressmen as well. So our immediate goals are to keep growing. I mean, we were 65 yesterday. Now we're over 1,000 people anyway, of who we have email addresses for. We're going to raise some money. We've got a communications committee and a number of other committees that are looking at how do we best spend that money to educate people, especially going after the vets, because we feel like veterans are an important force in the political structure of our country. And most of them, we do find, I mean, we spoke to over 200 graduates about that initial football coaches Black Lives Matter video, and it was about 85% that thought the video was out of place, not called for. But there are some that, kind of support it. Our goal is to educate them. Just as a quick example, in the Zoom that we had before the first Zoom, we brought in a number of liberals for two-hour sessions, Zoom sessions, before we went to the soup, with the soup on that video. And we said, you convince us of why this video is good, and we're going to convince you of why that video isn't good. I mean, so we did some prep there, and we convinced half of the group on the other side that, yeah, we were right. So, I think, again, if you keep hammering the message, and I just so appreciate you and your show, Rob, helping us get the message out. I would like to close the way that, in fact, you've kind of already stole my thunder a little bit, but
just habit of doing that.
But just to emphasize what you said, maybe using a few different words, we as Americans have spent trillions of taxpayer dollars over the last 7 decades, and we spilled a whole lot of American blood, tens of thousands of lives, fighting Marxism and communism from Korea to Vietnam and places in between. And yet today we seemingly are letting Marxism just kind of, I said creep, but maybe invade us from within. And we don't want to let that happen because, as we've seen from so many examples, it's just divisive. And we appreciate your effort in helping us get the word out about what we're about. And we invite your audience to come and join us and join in the fight.
Well, thank you, General. And what was that website again? STARRS.US. Is that correct?
Some people have said that they've been having trouble on just the stars.us with 2 R's, but have been able to get to it with www.stand together against racism and radicalism in the services, stars with 2 R's.us.
Okay, so try www. And the rest of the address, folks.
Stars.us.
Well, General Bishop, thank you very much, and thank your. I know your wife's there with you. Thank your wife for letting you stop and spend some time with us. The backbone of every officer, right there.
Yep.
The U.S. military that makes it.
You bet it
to happen.
She put up with 22 moves with me, so.
I know mine was on number 26 by the time we were done, and she's still putting up with me doing this because, like you, I'm just a guy out here not in the lowest paid job in the world, trying to be Thomas Paine and a pamphleteer and putting the truth out. And we've got to put the truth out, sir. So I do appreciate y'all's time. Safe travels.
Thank
be
you,
careful
sir.
out there. I know you got a long drive ahead of you, and I thank you very much. We'll send you links to all the parts of the show that we put out. We will publish it on Thursday on the website. And a segment tomorrow night too. So I'll send you a link to those through your email when we're done. That way you guys can share them too. I appreciate that. And God bless you, and God bless the United States Air Force and really the United States of America with men like you and your team, sir. We'll overcome this and we'll keep it from happening.
We're going to win.
All
Thanks,
right,
Rob. Appreciate it. Pleasure being with you. Pleasure to meet you. Bye-bye.
God bless you. Bye-bye. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I apologize for the comments capability on the show was not working today, so I didn't address any of your comments. We'll look into that and get it fixed by the next time we air. I want to thank and all of the service members, both active and retired, who have helped him establish the STARS organization. And you heard him. You can join stars.us. Go to www.starrs.us, and you can sign up and get their emails from them, because these men and women are apolitical. I didn't become political till I started running for office. Professional officers, especially, are generally apolitical, and we want the U.S. military to stay apolitical. And right now, there really is an invasion of neo-Marxism and critical theory into the United States Armed Forces. And that can only hurt you and me, because when we go to need that team and it can't function because it's too busy looking at each other and worried about each other's skin color, then our boat is sunk. So until next week, I'm Rob Maness. This is the Rob Maness Show on LifeSet TV. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you on Tuesday.